Hope everybody had a happy new year and a good holiday, of course. We're here today to talk about transition. It's the topic of conversation for everyone moving from especially 8th grade to the high school, and we're excited to have our special educators here from the middle school and the high school and our team to talk about the process to you and how it works and to answer any questions that you have. I'm Tim Luff. I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Student Services, and I would like to introduce the great team that I have before I introduce our speakers today.
Hi, I'm Laura Ives. I'm the Assistant Director of Student Services for both middle schools.
Hi, I'm Maria Reardon. I'm the Evaluation Team Leader at Brown Elementary School.
Hi, I'm Hannah Cross, Evaluation Team Leader at elementary level at Fantastic.
Hi, I'm Laura Brand, Evaluation Team Leader for grades 5, 6, and 7 for Wilson and Kennedy.
Hi, I'm Mary Beth Kincaid, Preschool Principal.
Hi, I'm Paul Pietra. I'm the Assistant Director of Student Services for the elementary schools.
And we have parents here.
Your parents here, of course. And of course, I'd like to introduce.
Hi, I'm Barbara Molinari Bates. I'm the Evaluation Team Leader for grades 10 through 12.
I'm Jennifer Brayman-Parikh, Evaluation Team Leader for grades 8 and 9.
And Barbara and Jen will be leading this very important conversation with you today in a presentation that was actually provided at a parent night, was it last week?
It was last week.
Last week, which was very well attended by families, and this one will be posted on our website. So if folks have any questions, please feel free to contact them or Aaron Miller, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, but they will be sure to answer any questions that you have. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Jen and Barbara for a great presentation. So, thank you.
All right, so the first slide we have is parents as partners. So this slide is just really about how kind of things are communicated at the high school. So the way that we do that, and some of this is very similar to what we do at the middle school, but there may be some differences, and at the high school level in particular, you might see some differences in regards to the type of communication or the way that the homework is posted. Some teachers, use Moodle. Other teachers use Google Classroom. But this communication is really important, and just as parents do in the middle school, it's really important that, even though a kid is, in special education, it's really important for parents and the general education teachers to also, have open communication and in regards to how the student is doing. So, at the high school level, that's something that we continue to encourage parents to do with us. So Erin Miller will say this all the time, that she is all about reconvene meetings. So anytime that there is a concern that the team might have about, a student, and or if the parent has a concern, we really like to come together and have a reconvene meeting to discuss those concerns. I think it's really important to be able to have, for everybody to be in the same room. Sometimes, communication can not come across in the same way via email, or, sitting down at the table and having everybody available to talk through kind of what's going on really, really makes a difference. Carryover skills. So all of these skills here are things that, are really important at the high school level. So one thing that we see is, kids having more independence with time management. We know that they're still working on that in 9th grade, but we try in 8th grade to start developing those skills. We're moving from a team-based model where all of their general ed teachers are on the same teams to a model where teachers are not on teams. So they're not necessarily talking to one another all the time. They don't know what the other one is doing. So it's really important for, to prepare, your children to learn how to email their teachers, how to collaborate with them, and case managers of your students will help continue this process of learning how to do that and learning those skills. Timelines and work completion, just like, in 8th grade at the high school level, there are a lot of projects along with daily homework. So it's important for students to be trying to learn how to forecast their time. Attendance at the high school is really, really important. At all levels it's important, but, when we're talking about credit, earning credit for classes, it's really important for students to be in school. and to be on time for school. A lot of times when students struggle with this, it becomes really, really hard to, we don't really hold kids back anymore, but earning credit for each year is really, really important. So, CVS Block. So in the morning, there is a 40-minute block that students enter their day. For freshmen and upperclassmen, this looks kind of different. We have a mentor program that was started this year, and we feel like that has gone really well. So what that is one time during the 4-day cycle, upperclassmen, anywhere from 3 to 6 upperclassmen are part of the CDS block, and they come in and they do team building activities with the teacher. The idea is to help kids feel connected and feel like they have a trusted adult. So, the teacher of that class as well as upperclassmen that they can ask questions and kind of feel like they're starting to be connected to the high school as freshmen. After freshman year, that block changes. Do you want to talk a little bit about how that
and I
block
just want to add that mentorship program is absolutely amazing. I am a substitute for the program because they always have to have a staff member in the room, and I was just so absolutely impressed at the upperclassmen. You would have thought they were staff members. The way they lead, the interactions, even the way they're able to sort of maintain, I guess, discipline with some, feisty freshmen who come in the morning and are eager to talk. They really okay, we have to focus, and they do great activities. So it really is very impressive, sort of that relationship building that happens between the upperclassmen and the freshmen. For upperclassmen, the CDS block really is all about either catching up on homework, taking the opportunity to make appointments to meet with other teachers, if they have to make up a test. It's really sort of a catch-all they can go to the library if they have to research something. So it's an opportunity to have that extra time to do whatever each individual student needs to do.
So high school case manager. So this is, at the younger grades, sometimes it's called a liaison, but we like to call them the case manager. And so they would be your special ed students' kind of point person. They also, if your student has a skills development block, they also typically are a part of that block as well. And so, let's see. So the role of this person really is to, communicate with the parents, to work with the student during that skills development block and kind of coordinate all of their classes. They help, they manage the IEP. They partnership with myself and Barbara and how kind of that looks. They work on the students' IEP goals during this time. But they really are your point person. If something goes wrong, you're feeling like something is not going well, you can contact them and they should be able to help you determine whether or not, you need to reconvene or how to kind of talk through or process whatever that's going on. They kind of coordinate everything for your child. Is there anything else you want to add to that?
I don't think so. I think that really covers it. Yeah.
So in terms of high school, homework expectations are going to increase at the high school level. So that's something that you'll see is, going to be a little bit of a change from middle to high school. Project and group work. A lot of this happens, I think, now at the middle school as well, especially in 8th grade. They're learning those skills, but that, carries over even more at the high school level. And you'll see students collaborating oftentimes after school with the library. I wouldn't be surprised if, at home when they're doing homework, they're often talking about having to, work with their group members. But you'll definitely see sometimes an increase in more independence with this. Whereas I think in the middle school, a lot of that time happens in class when they're collaborating. So I think that might look a little bit different when you're talking about, going into 9th grade. One of the things that is, important to note is, the extracurriculars. So we like kids to be part of the community and doing stuff after school, but just making sure that we're balancing, you know, how much are they doing, because sometimes kids, you know, think they have to do everything. So it's all about balancing that. Sometimes kids have a sport, but we do like students to be part of the community. So grades and GPA are also really important at the high school level, because now is when it really starts to matter about, my volume might be, sorry. So this also goes along with credit as well, where, you know, grades really do matter and your GPA does matter for the next step, whatever in life that they're going to do. And a lot of kids you'll hear like, oh, you know, 9th grade, it's not really important. It doesn't matter. Colleges don't care as much about 9th grade. That's not really true. We don't want to overemphasize this and, you know, make people feel worried. But at the same time, we do want to, you know, just point out that it is important and it will help, you know, carry your child over from grade to grade. Graduation requirements. So again, talking about credit, you know, each year, you know, students are required to take certain classes, and along with electives. One of the biggest changes that I also see from middle to high is kind of the expectations in their elective courses. So there definitely is an uptick in that. I noticed that that's a pretty big adjustment for 8th graders when they come to the high school, kind of learning about, you know, they have to take it serious. It's not just, it's fun, but it also does carry, you know, an academic component to it. And there may be homework, and I think that all of that is much newer for students.
I think we talked about it, well, just two things. I think we talked about specials versus electives. So kids think of electives kind of as specials, where, you know, they just go and do their art, but it's not necessarily as important. But a lot of, as Jen said, a lot of the electives are really academically based. I mean, even the art courses. I am shocked every time I see some of the art courses and the expectations that the students have to fulfill to meet, you know, all the curriculum standards. And then the only other thing I would say about homework, this is always something that I say at every team meeting, tell your students to, you know, we have the rotating schedule, the red and the blue, and students will often, so if they have English on red day, then they have blue day, and they will tend to leave their homework until the night before it's due, whereas it's so much better if you just keep up, if you do it that night, or at least start looking at it. That way, if you do have any questions or you have any, you know, concerns with it, you can utilize the CVS Block the next day, or you have opportunities to find out as opposed to leaving it to the last minute. So that schedule change of the every other day is really important when you're considering the homework and the expectations.
So transition planning. So this starts when your child turns 14 years old. You know, the federal mandate is, I believe, 16, but I think in Massachusetts, several years, it's been a long time now, I think, that we've been doing this, but we start at 14, and so in 8th grade, we're really inviting kids to have meetings, their IEP meetings, having them come and talk about kind of what they like to do. Sometimes I think for them it's, you know, that first year is a little difficult, but I feel like case managers do a really good job in 8th grade of, you know, kind of walking them through that process, and then they come in. Most students, when I'm at the meeting, they definitely do a good job kind of presenting what their wishes are, you know, what their vision is for their life, and their interests and their strengths. And I think that that's a really valuable part of the team process. And what I see in 8th grade is students are often very nervous when they first come, but we try to make it as comfortable as we can for them. And so I think the teams do a really good job at this. Even if, I just want to also say, with the parents' permission, if we have a meeting for a kid when they're still 13, we do also like to invite them and ask the parent, is it okay if they attend the meeting? Because I think it's important for them to have that as part of their meeting in 8th grade in preparation for high school, when we really do ask them to to play a larger role in their meeting. So in my opinion, even if a student is 13, having them at that meeting and having that experience is really valuable in a place where they have had, 4 years already, they feel comfortable. I think that it works out really well. Do you want to talk about the latter part of transition planning?
Yeah, so as the students progress through, the grades, transition planning sort of becomes a little bit more involved, and depending on each individual student and what their needs are, potentially there might be even more involvement. The transition course that is referenced is for seniors. It's an IEP course, so if your student were to be recommended, it is through the team process, and it's called the Senior Summit. And it's a course that's it's sort of led by 3 special educators: our transition coordinator, our speech and language pathologist, and a special education teacher, and they touch upon all different topics. And it's for students who are not necessarily on your traditional general education path of, okay, I'm completing this and I'm going off to college. It's students who, they may be going to college, but they just require a little bit more support in planning that and I guess building that bridge to get there. So that's something that, again, that's typically recommended at your student's junior IEP meeting. But we do have a lot of staff and a lot of supports. We have, as part of general education, we have the guidance seminars that are led by their guidance counselors that help with the transition process. We have all kinds of volunteer opportunities here within the school that students participate in. Again, we look at each individual student and what kinds of things, we look at what their interests are and what their vision is, and we help sort of build that. So for instance, if somebody is looking to go into some type of, nursing program, we make sure that they take all the science courses. And we just look at each individual and really build in that action plan of the transition planning form. That's where we really focus. And we also partner with families because a lot of the pieces are family related. So, families will suggest maybe you might want to go and visit colleges sooner rather than later. So it's a community based, it's families and the school and sometimes the community together.
And I just wanted to make note about the senior internship since
yeah.
that's up there. No, it's all right. So at the high school level, we have kind of revamped our senior internship and made it a little, Brian likes to say, we've added a little more meat to it. So we've made it a requirement to have a class aspect of it. And it's meant to be student driven in the sense of what projects they decide to pick, and kind of the idea is to help them learn how to figure out, I've picked this, was this a good decision, but kind of walking through the research process and how does that look, and kind of seeing something through. And so they'll have a chance to kind of practice that a little bit in the class prior to kind of going out on the internship. I can't remember exactly how many hours. Is it 100 hours?
I don't remember the hours, but the big difference is students used to just basically, the fall semester of their senior year, by a certain date, they would have to put their name on a list, and then they'd find an internship, and they would go and do it, and then they would have some kind of project at the end of May. Now you actually have to apply in the spring semester of your junior year, and then because you're going to be taking the course the fall semester of your senior year, and then you're going to have the internship the spring. So it's a much more, rigorous process, and students really have to plan ahead. So I think once, this upcoming year might be a little challenging because it's going to be a big jump in students, but once sort of the students who are here and accustomed to the old way, I'm sure it'll become a much more fluid process. Yeah.
So academic skills development. So most students, when they transition from 8th to 9th grade, they have a class called skills development that they were doing at the middle school level. The delivery looks a little bit different for students, but it does depend on what the IEP team determines. Most students do it, every other day in the high school schedule. Not all students, but most will do that. Some don't have this class, but most do. And this class is, based upon, what the IEP goals are. So what is your individual student working on? And some kids have, multiple layers to that. Like it's not, but a lot of kids have like a planning and organizational goal. That would be something that would be worked on in skills development. Sometimes you have kids that are, really, really struggling with that time management. That's something that's worked on there. Teachers work with students on how to email teachers. Self-advocacy is a big part of this block. And I want to say, it's not time for students to just do homework, but teachers do teach these skills through homework, through projects, through whatever it is they're working on academically, so that it's more meaningful to kids and they can then apply and generalize those skills. So that's kind of what happens during this block. In addition to that, we last year we purchased an executive functioning kind of curriculum that we're using, and teachers are, every teacher does it a little bit different, or a case manager does it a little bit different, but for the most part, most of them do it, I would say once a cycle or so. They take like a 20-30 minute time frame to kind of do some sort of mini lesson with students around the executive functioning skills, because we just feel that that's like a big need at the high school level for students. So that's just another kind of thing that happens a lot during this block.
Yeah. The only thing, just that from the day your student enters the high school, the focus here is independence and thinking ahead to when they're going to be leaving high school, and that they're not going to have the amount of support that they have here. So we always, each year that we meet, we talk about, so for, just as an example, maybe a student might have their case manager communicating with their teachers freshman year to make sure that they're on track, and then maybe sophomore year the teacher might prompt them and work with them for them to initiate and write the emails. And so we just kind of peel away so that it's more, it goes from the teacher doing it to with support to independence, and that's sort of the trajectory, because we want kids to leave here and have their toolbox and be confident and be able to go out into the world and have those strategies and be able to apply them.
So these essential skills classes, some students, with disabilities require a more specialized kind of content area or content material to be taught. So we're gonna have small group classes for, I think, the science in 9th grade, for science, for math, and for English. And we kind of determine that based on student need every year. So right now, with the cohort this specific year, that's kind of what we're looking at as a need for next year. And so what these courses are is they're outside of the general education classroom, but they're taught by special educators that are dually certified in that content area. And so it does go along with the Massachusetts curriculum frameworks, but it's not exactly, it's a modified curriculum. It's not exactly the same, doesn't go into the same depth as maybe the other classes. So it is a modified curriculum, and as I had said previously, this is something that would be decided upon at an IEP meeting for your child. It's not a class that is kind of, so, and they're smaller in size. Sometimes there is a paraprofessional assigned to this class, but not always. It depends on the size of that and the need of the students within that classroom, but it is a small group class as well. And then typically the teachers that do teach this course at the high school level also co-teach in that same subject area. So they're kind of seeing, the teacher has the expertise of saying, like, what is the general curriculum doing? Then, they can kind of determine what they're doing in that class as well. So that's great. And as I had just mentioned about the Cotaught classes, so in all the core areas, we offer Cotaught classes. Again, this is a decision that is made, by the IEP team. And these classes are, again, as I said, they're taught by a special education teacher that is also certified in that content area, whether it be math or English. or science. They're dually certified, so they have the special ed expertise as well as the content area expertise, and they teach with general education teachers that the core subjects of English, math, science, and social studies. And if you've ever been in these classes, I feel like they do a really, really good job. Sometimes kids have no idea who the special educator is, who the general education teacher is in that room, and that's exactly what we want to see. And both of those teachers are helping all of those students in that classroom. And I think it helps students to feel less stigmatized, the special education students, so they're not feeling like they're the only ones being helped, they're not being called out. It's kind of a nice, it's meant to be a mix of about 50%, that's the ideal. And we try to actually have less than 50%. These class sizes at the high school level are also kept a little bit smaller than your general, college prep classes. So I want to say they're around 17 to, they don't usually go over 20 if possible. We do the best that we can, but we try to keep these classes smaller if possible. Also, at times, sometimes there may be a parent in there as well, because sometimes that's something that the student need. That's good. Yeah. And then the supported classes are classes that are just supported by a paraprofessional. So not necessarily like the Cotaught where you have a special education teacher in there. You would have just a paraprofessional in there with a general education teacher. And this class is more for your student that might just require like some check-ins. Sometimes kids that have attentional struggles, this might be a good kind of model for these students. But it's not, they're not getting that specialized instruction in this class. Obviously, if a student requires, any kind of modifications, accommodations, things, that happens in a supported class as well. But it's a different level. I would say it's a step down from having a Cotaught class for this type of support.
Sure, I think we already talked about the skills development, we already talked about the transition, and we talked about the fact that they are recommended through the IEP process, so I don't think we really need to go through any of this again. And then we have, you were gonna do the access, right?
So we have a substantially separate program called Access at the high school, and again, this is determined by IEP, at your IEP team meeting. So this program is for students who have more significant disabilities. Some of them might be on the spectrum or have cognitive impairments that might cause them to be in here where they need some more life skills. You'll see functional academics, especially in 9th grade. You'll still see that in this program. You'll still see the academics being taught. They're just taught in a different way. Christine Fleming, the teacher that actually teaches this course, does a really nice job at kind of teaching the actual reading math skills, but through a real world kind of way. She pulls it together really nicely, I feel like, in this program. Kids also, in this program they're learning about pre-vocational and vocational training. So in the classroom there's a washer and dryer, they do a lot of cooking, they go out in the community a lot, they take a lot of community field trips to the grocery store, learning about kind of how to purchase your own groceries, and again they carry over the math skills there, which is really great. They may, an example might be that they may be cooking that week, so they go out shopping for the materials that they need, they come into the classroom, they make it, they do the recipes, she breaks it down step by step. There's that. And then some of the students are taking the regular MCAS, but then some students are on an alt MCAS in this with this profile. But I feel like more and more we're seeing that this program is, some kids are not in there fully. They also take courses outside of this program. They all take electives outside of this program, but more and more we're seeing kind of a mix of not all access classes. They're in there for, maybe some portion of the day. Some of them take some academics outside of the class as well. It's really based on student need. So, we're, as much as possible, we're having kids out in general education classes, but sometimes they need that home base as well. So that's kind of what this program is all about.
Okay, so we have, we'll get to the next slide as well, but we have 2 programs that support our students with social emotional needs. The first one is the Compass program. Basically, students who are in the Compass program are in general education classes. They might have some support, or they might have one small group class, but the main function for the Compass program is that they have a home base. So the program has a full-time clinician and a full-time special education teacher who collaborate and do wraparound services with families, with outside providers. Some students might be in there just for the CVS block and then be fine and be out. Other students might have more support. Again, it's based on every student's needs. If students are struggling during the day or at any point in the year, they do have the opportunity to take their work and go in the Compass class and complete work so that they're not falling behind. So that's sort of the home base piece. I think that's it. And then the North Star program is our alternative education program. And really the way I like to refer to it as is a school within a school. So it's in a corridor. So it's like a mini school, and it has a full-time program supervisor. It has a full-time social worker. There are several paras. They have their own art room. They have their own foreign language class. They have their own computer room where they can do like Grad Point, which is the credit recovery. They have teachers who are duly certified in special education and the content area. So students who are recommended for this program are students who just need a sort of a different approach. The schedule is different. They really can highly individualize things. It's typically students who have tried multiple different, from least restrictive through the continuum before you get to that, because that really is the most restrictive program. The other thing that's great about the program is that it has a community-based feel to it. So all the students start their day in the common room and just kind of have, all the teachers are there. They have announcements. What's the day? Is there anything different? So students, the great thing about it is they can be there all day, or some students do access electives. They certainly can come to the cafeteria and eat if they want, or they can go back. So it really has a lot of flexibility as opposed to outside programs. So it's really the best of both worlds, and honestly, we're really, really proud of that program for the students that do require it.
The only other thing I would mention about that is I feel like in the past, this program, the profile of the student was more behavioral in nature, whereas now we're seeing it's much more of a therapeutic milieu for students. The profile of our students have changed, and that's really it's really more of a student that needs that therapeutic milieu and wraparound of care and coordination. So.
Yep.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all very much and thank you